Section 1. The Observers Among the Stars. Humanity as the Galactic Curiosity. / 700 plus words. Long before humanity ever reached the stars, we were being watched. The Galactic Coalition, a collective of ancient alien species scattered across thousands of star systems, had long since mastered the art of passive observation. To them, intelligence was not a rarity, it was a spectrum. Civilizations rose and fell across the galaxy, like the flickering of candles, and the Coalition watched them all with cold detachment. Humanity, when finally discovered, was merely another flicker in the void. An oddity, a curiosity, a primitive species on a small blue planet, orbiting a yellow star at the edge of a quiet arm of the Milky Way. They found us before we ever knew to look up. Their first contact wasn't a greeting or even a message. It was silence wrapped in scrutiny. Using cloaked satellites, planetary-scale sensory arrays, and advanced quantum entanglement probes, they began to catalog human behavior, technology, biology, and culture. Their role wasn't to intervene. It was to observe, classify, and learn. To them, we were the galactic equivalent of an ant colony under a microscope. In their records, humanity was labeled as subject, Terra Sapien Class Zeta, a low-priority entry in the Coalition's anthropological archives. Our aggression, our wars, our pollution, and our fractured governments were cited as evidence of a species still ruled by base instincts. A Coalition report circulated internally said, "They are industrious, but short-sighted. Curious, but reckless. They exhibit cycles of advancement followed by collapse. The dominant trait appears to be emotional volatility, viable for long-term study, but no threat to broader galactic order." We were, quite literally, the ants of the galaxy. The analogy caught on across observer cultures. One race, the Siraki, even gave Earth the nickname the Hill. In their eyes, our cities mirrored ant colonies, crowded, noisy, and resilient. Observers watched with fascination as humans built megacities, fought wars, healed diseases, explored physics, and flew crude rockets into orbit. But despite our persistence, we were considered biologically limited, technologically backward, and most importantly, incapable of interstellar travel for at least another few hundred years. What they missed was not a failure of intelligence. It was a failure of imagination. The problem wasn't that humans were unpredictable. It was that the Coalition misunderstood what that unpredictability meant. They saw it as chaos, not creativity. Instability, not resilience. What looked like irrational behavior, sacrificing for strangers, revolting against tyrants, inventing against all odds, was in fact the signature of a deeply complex and fiercely independent mind. Where the Coalition favored optimization and order, humans favored improvisation and instinct. In their grand simulations, the observers ran billions of scenarios on how Earth might evolve. None of them predicted what was to come. Among the thousands of alien sociologists and xenobiologists that studied Earth, one individual, a Zavari named Telsha, voiced concern. She wrote a classified report titled "The Fire Beneath the Hill," warning that Earth's history showed a consistent pattern. Every catastrophic event was followed not by stagnation, but by a leap forward. From wars rose revolutions in technology and philosophy. From disaster emerged innovation. This species, she wrote, feeds on adversity. They transform pain into purpose. If pushed, they may not break. They may ignite. Her peers laughed. To them, Telsha was being melodramatic. What could ants do against the stars? What could Earth offer that the Coalition hadn't already seen 1,000 times before? So they continued to watch, oblivious to the kindling being laid across the human world. And on Earth, we remained unaware of their silent judgment. To us, the night sky was still filled with mystery. Scientists searched for signs of alien life, imagining civilizations far beyond our comprehension. We looked for radio signals, for signs of intelligent design, for anything to prove we weren't alone. But the irony was cruel. While we searched the heavens were already watching, cold and unfeeling. The observers didn't know it then, but they weren't studying an insect. They were studying something far more dangerous. They underestimated the human spirit. What the coalition failed to grasp, what they never included in their equations or projections, was that ants, when threatened, can swarm. When cornered, they fight with everything they have. And when their hill burns, they do not scatter in fear. They rebuild. Faster. Smarter. Stronger. The Galactic Coalition thought they were peering into a terrarium, safe behind the glass. But what they didn't realize was that humanity had already begun pressing against the edges. The hill was growing, and with it, the fire. They studied us like ants, and they would come to regret not asking what we were building beneath the soil. Section 2. The Spark of Provocation. When observation turned into interference. / 700 plus words. For centuries, the Galactic Coalition adhered strictly to one principle above all when it came to undeveloped civilizations: non-interference. The Observation Accords had stood for millennia, forbidding any form of direct contact, influence, or intervention in the natural development of lesser species. It was a moral code cloaked in bureaucracy, one meant to protect both the primitive and the observer. But like all doctrines, it was vulnerable to arrogance and ambition. It began with a whisper inside the coalition's scientific community, a quiet rebellion among xenopsychologists, behavioral analysts, and bioengineers. Some saw Earth not as a species to respect from afar, but as a laboratory, a case study too tantalizing to leave untouched. After all, the human mind was a contradiction of chaos and creativity, emotion and reason, destruction and progress. What would happen, these rogue thinkers wondered, if they nudged the ants just slightly? Not to help them, of course, but to observe how they'd scurry when fire was lit at the edge of their hill. So they did. At first, the changes were almost imperceptible. A prototype quantum algorithm accidentally leaked into a global research network. A corrupted data packet containing information on magnetic containment slipped into a university's encrypted files. In less than 2 decades, breakthroughs began appearing all over Earth, technologies years, sometimes centuries, ahead of where they should have been. Cold fusion, room temperature superconductors, advancements in quantum encryption, energy storage, and even early gravity manipulation. Human engineers and scientists were shocked. The data felt alien, both in its brilliance and in the eerie fact that it appeared as if by accident or dream. Some dismissed it as lucky inspiration. Others believed they had stumbled across secrets the universe was eager to reveal. But deep in military think tanks and private labs, a more disturbing theory emerged: someone was tampering with us. What the coalition didn't count on was the human gift for paranoia. Across several nations, independent researchers and intelligence agencies began comparing notes. Patterns emerged. Innovations that shouldn't exist had strangely similar structures, as if written in the same invisible language. Code that carried syntax no known human had ever written. Math that solved problems before the questions had even been asked. Then came the whistleblowers. Low-level observers from within the coalition, disturbed by what they saw, began leaking fragments of the truth. Not in person, they couldn't afford that risk, but through hijacked signals and anomalies in Earth's radio spectrum. To most of the world, it was just static. To a few highly observant minds on Earth, it was something else, a conversation. A team of engineers, physicists, and cryptographers, scattered across different continents, but united by shared suspicion, cracked the code. The message was fragmented but clear. You're being studied, not respected, manipulated. The revelation ignited fury in Earth's hidden halls of power. Not fear, not despair, but rage. Humanity had endured war, poverty, environmental collapse, and self-inflicted wounds, but always on its own terms. To learn that some cosmic hand had been shaping our path without consent, that our proudest innovations might not be entirely ours, that our fate was a plaything in the hands of ancient interstellar voyeurs, that was intolerable. Secret councils were formed between world powers. A shadow alliance known only to a handful of people emerged, ***, the Crucible Initiative ***. Its goal was simple: end the observation. find out who was watching Earth, how and why, and then send a message they'd never forget. Using the same alien tech that had been gifted, or rather leaked, humanity began its counter-observation. Our best minds hacked the probes that circled our orbit. We didn't destroy them. We used them, fed them false data, traced their origin points, and, in doing so, mapped entire stretches of coalition surveillance infrastructure. Where once we were studied, now we were watching back. The final trigger came not from the coalition but from humanity itself. In an unprecedented act of defiance, Earth satellites hijacked a coalition relay and sent a message across the galactic network, deliberately encoded in primitive binary and yet unmistakably human. We were the ants. You lit the hill. Now the fire spreads. The message arrived like a thunderclap. To the coalition, it was unthinkable. The observers were never supposed to be known. The ants were never supposed to see the magnifying glass. But now they had not only seen it, they had grasped it. The coalition scrambled to control the fallout. Some factions argued for immediate contact. Others pushed for disengagement and denial. A few demanded more drastic measures, to reset Earth's progress, to wipe the slate clean. But they were too late. Humanity was no longer asleep beneath the stars. We were awake. And worse for the observers, we were angry. It wasn't just about technological interference. It was about dignity, about sovereignty, about the right to rise, stumble, fall, and rise again on our own terms. The spark had been struck. The hill was smoldering. And soon, the fire would burn outward, across the stars. Section 3. When the hill fought back. The rise of human retaliation. / 700 plus words. By the time the Galactic Coalition fully realized what it had done, it was too late to put the fire out. They had poked the hill and watched curiously as the ants scrambled. But these were no ordinary ants, and this was no ordinary hill. Earth, long treated as a quaint, backwater planet of self-destructive primitives, had begun to awaken in a way no coalition simulation had ever predicted. Not with blind rage, not with desperation, but with ruthless, calculated precision. Project Colony Fire was humanity's answer. Conceived in the hidden depths of black-budget laboratories and hardened military think tanks, Colony Fire united Earth's fractured nations for the first time, not through idealism, but through necessity. Political boundaries became irrelevant. Cultural differences faded. There was only one objective now: to burn the hand that lit the hill. It began with information warfare. Humanity, having already reverse-engineered the coalition's observational systems, launched a full-scale cyber offensive, not to destroy, but to disrupt. Earth-based AIs, fused with alien code, infiltrated the coalition's most sensitive communications networks. They weren't viruses in the traditional sense. They were questions, recursive algorithms that endlessly demanded answers from systems not built to philosophize. Entire databanks collapsed under the weight of Earth-made logic puzzles and paradoxes. Navigation systems failed mid-transit. Archives filled with centuries of alien knowledge were corrupted with human poetry, memes, and seemingly nonsensical riddles. One coalition vessel lost control when its central AI began reciting Shakespeare, refusing to obey commands unless addressed in iambic pentameter. The coalition had never encountered anything like this. Their societies were built on predictability, hierarchy, and strict logical structure. Human culture, by contrast, thrived in noise, in contradiction, emotion, improvisation. What had been dismissed as weakness was, in fact, our deadliest weapon. While the digital war raged in the stars, humanity's next step was even more daring: physical retaliation. Using salvaged fragments of alien tech, acquired through hijacked probes and secret trade with minor alien dissidents, Earth constructed its first interstellar vessels. They weren't large, and they weren't beautiful, but they were fast, stealthy, and terrifyingly clever. These ships didn't engage in conventional warfare. Instead, they slipped into coalition territory like ghosts. They sabotaged defense grids, hacked space stations, and inserted surveillance nodes into the coalition's own observation equipment. One coalition installation, Station Varnex, reported a full systems blackout followed by the appearance of a single phrase across every monitor, written in a language they had only begun to decipher. "We are not your study. We are your consequence." Soon after, Station Varnex exploded from within. No coalition ships were attacked directly. No formal declaration of war was issued. But the message was unmistakable. Humanity had teeth. And we were biting back. Asterisk, asterisk. Even more alarming to the coalition was the psychological warfare. Earth's operatives had learned from their observers. They had studied the species who once studied them. They knew their fears, their political tensions, their cultural taboos. In coalition capitals, public infrastructure began playing distorted Earth music through citywide comms. In some cities, holograms of Earth history's most defiant moments, like the storming of the Bastille or the fall of the Berlin Wall, were projected without warning, accompanied by cryptic human slogans. Asterisk, chains break. Fires spread. Asterisk, this wasn't conquest. It was reversal. Humanity didn't aim to dominate the galaxy. It aimed to humiliate its watchers, to force them to feel what it was like to be under the lens, vulnerable, exposed, and powerless. Coalition leaders panicked. Emergency councils were formed. Factions splintered. Species that had long relied on coalition protection began questioning the wisdom of their alliance. Rumors spread of an upcoming human fleet, powered by hybrid technologies and driven by something the coalition couldn't comprehend: spirit. For all their advancements, the coalition had never understood the raw force of belief. Of vengeance born not from hate, but from justice. Of unity forged not in peace, but in shared fury. The final straw came when an Earthborn AI infiltrated a coalition academic archive and published every classified document on Earth's observation, including detailed files on human biology, psychological vulnerabilities, and predictive behavior models. The coalition had mapped humanity like insects, and now every human on Earth had access to those maps. The collective response was not despair. It was fury. Earth's networks lit up with outrage, but also something more profound: resolve. Artists painted murals of ants rising in flame, stomping out alien silhouettes. Filmmakers turned the story into rallying cries. Children were taught not just that aliens existed, but that they had underestimated us. The final broadcast Earth sent to the coalition before going dark from their sensors was brief and chilling. "This is the last time you see us. From now on, you'll feel us." And then silence. No more signals. No more interference. Just the echo of fear across star systems that had once looked down on Earth as an irrelevant, in the void. But the hill wasn't irrelevant anymore. It was alive, burning bright in the darkness. And soon it would rise. Section 4. The fire that would not die. Humanity's rise as the new apex. / 700 plus words. When the dust finally settled, the Galactic Coalition was no longer the unified, arrogant force it once was. Its stars, once symbols of dominance and control, now flickered with fear and uncertainty. What had begun as an anthropological study had ignited a chain reaction no simulation could contain. Humanity had not just resisted the experiment, they had rewritten the rules of the entire galactic game. The coalition had shattered. The cracks first appeared among the mid-tier civilizations, species who had always teetered between obedience and resentment under the coalition's thumb. When Earth began striking back with impossible precision, these races saw opportunity in chaos. Quietly at first, they reached out to the humans. Some sent encrypted messages offering data, safe passage, or trade. Others began sabotaging coalition infrastructure from within, hoping to curry favor with Earth's rising power. Then came the fractures in the core. Coalition leadership, long reliant on rigid hierarchy and sterile logic, was completely unequipped to deal with the human onslaught of psychological warfare and viral infiltration. Their meeting halls were flooded with fear-laced arguments. Some screamed for war. Others begged for peace. A few even proposed evacuation from vulnerable systems entirely. Humanity responded with a statement not of diplomacy, but of dominance. A single human vessel, the vigilant ember, appeared in the skies above the former observation command world of Velthrex. The ship didn't fire a weapon. It didn't send a formal request. Instead, it broadcast Earth's anthem on all frequencies, a music composed of sorrow, hope, and fury. The sound paralyzed every coalition operative who heard it, because in that haunting melody, they understood. Earth had arrived, not as a guest, but as the new fire in the sky. What followed was not conquest, but transformation. Earth did not build an empire. It built something worse for the coalition. Influence, Where the coalition had ruled with surveillance and superiority, Earth offered partnership, but only to those who came with honesty and respect. Minor species, once labeled as non-strategic or too emotional, were given voice through humanity's growing network. A new kind of galactic order began to form, one driven not by technological dominance, but by mutual experience of marginalization. Humanity didn't forget what it meant to be studied like insects. And so, Earth took up a new role, not the ruler, but the reckoner. For those who had aided the coalition's manipulation of developing worlds, justice was served. A special tribunal was established in orbit over the burned remains of Station Varnex. Unlike the coalition's sterile, algorithm-driven courts, the human tribunal demanded something terrifying to its defendants: truth, emotion, and empathy. One by one, the observers responsible for Earth's interference were brought forward. They expected cold trials and predetermined verdicts. What they received were testimonies from human victims, scientists who had built careers on knowledge they later discovered wasn't truly theirs, historians who had to rewrite their legacy, families who suffered because of misplaced advancements. The final statement from the tribunal was carved into the steel ring of the station. We were the hill you thought would burn. Instead, we became the flame that judges. The message spread like wildfire. Humanity's cultural influence grew faster than its fleets. Earth music became forbidden contraband in surviving coalition worlds, yet it echoed in black markets and underworld taverns. Earth literature, with its endless explorations of rebellion, trauma, and growth, became prized material for alien youth. Artists, rebels, and thinkers across the stars began painting Earth's anthill, no longer a symbol of weakness, but one of uprising. And yet humanity did not stop rising. With reverse-engineered drive cores and hybrid AI organic systems, Earth began sending fleets, not to invade, but to explore. The stars, once held just beyond reach by the unseen hand of their observers, were now open to those who had broken their chains. Human ships visited planets long considered forbidden zones. On every world they landed, they planted not flags, but fire symbol beacons. A new saying emerged across the galaxy: where the hill burns, freedom follows. Galactic scholars began rewriting their understanding of humanity. What had once been viewed as chaotic, emotional unpredictability was now reframed as adaptive resilience. Human irrationality was reclassified as creative divergence. Even the ant analogy was recontextualized. One alien poet wrote, "They call them ants. But what is an ant? A builder, a soldier, a survivor. Together they moved mountains. Alone, they reshaped the stars." The final echo of the old coalition came as a whisper from its last surviving prime mind, an ancient AI construct designed to preserve galactic order. Its final transmission, intercepted by a human listening array, simply said, "We watched them too long to realize they were watching us back." Humanity responded with one last broadcast, short, sharp, undeniable. "You looked down and saw ants. We looked up and saw gods. You tampered with fire. Now, the hill burns still." And with that, Earth went silent again. Not because it was hiding, but because it no longer needed to speak. The galaxy had heard enough.